Great. So, welcome everyone. Good to see you all here. I'm also seeing some familiar faces. I must apologize for my face. My beard is much longer than it normally is, but this is because my 6-month-old, just about a half hour ago, was doing her new favorite thing, which is just petting me like an animal. So, I'm not allowed to shave until she stops doing that. I don't know how these rules work with parenting, but that's my assumption. So I look disheveled is just because it's an intentional choice, we'll say, as opposed to neglect. Um, Welcome everyone. As you get settled and as more people start to come in, if you are willing, I would be very curious. I always think of the old Jay-Z quote that you could be anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me. And there's this element of what brings people to a talk specifically about stress at the end of the year. So if you feel so comfortable dropping into the chat something that is coming up for you that is causing you stress or anxiety, that's great. And I promise I will not read them with your name, so it will remain anonymous for the recording and so on. But as we get going here, I just want to welcome you. I'm looking around, I'm seeing we actually have people from around the world, and I want to thank in particular the people who are in the future, particularly the people who it is tomorrow for them, based on our many time zones. I'm always impressed when people come and that they're actually living in the next day. It gives me hope for the future, specifically that it exists. So let's start with a simple equation, simple thought experiment, really. If I asked you, would you rather be anxious or happy? Which would you pick? And again, you can just type this into the chat. Happy. Okay, just a stream of happies coming in. I'm not entirely surprised. This is, I actually, having asked this question for years, have a 100% success rate to the happy scale. People generally don't say, oh, I would actually consciously like to be stressed out. I would like to be anxious. And yet, many of us spend a lot of our mental state there. And I noticed that someone said that actually they work with a lot of clients who are stressed out right now and have a lot of questions about working with the holidays. So, that's a very common thing. It's not always just us that's carrying this. It's often sort of almost a communal stress that there's the people we work with, there's the people in our family, all of these sorts of things. And it's almost like stress gets compounded with stress, which gets compounded with stress. I'm actually going to want to break out these two terms in just a minute between stress and anxiety and sort of clarify just a little bit more about what I mean when I use those terms. But for the moment, I want to stay with this thought experiment. If everyone here said, actually, I would like to choose happiness. Sometimes, after 2 decades plus of working with people and the form of meditation, I find that people who are newer to meditation have this tendency to say, oh, no, 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 you don't understand. I don't get to choose whether I experience anxiety. It's just part of who I am, or it's part of my work, or it's part of my family, or whatever it might be, right? People who have been meditating for a little while come to me and they often are like, remember that conversation? Turns out that there is someone making a choice, and it's me. I get to choose whether I live a life that is constantly chasing after anxiety producing thoughts, or actually cutting through some of those thoughts and finding some sense of happiness in the present moment. So, who determines this choice of anxiety versus happiness? It's actually me, it's actually you. So, I want to talk a little bit about that because that might sound impossible to some people, or that might sound intriguing to others. So, we're going to talk about how we work with the mind and specifically how meditation can help. We're going to do some meditation practice tonight. And then I want to talk a little bit about what I call family karma, because this is a time where a lot of buttons are pushed around family and sort of habitual things that have come up in the past, often come up around the holiday season. So we'll talk about that. And as promised in the advertising, there will be 3 sort of on the spot techniques that will help us specifically around stress and anxiety. So first, let's start with some good news. The good news is that the mind is workable. This is very, very good news. There's also bad news. The bad news is that no one's figured out how to eradicate stress. That's just not something that's happened yet. But the good news is that we can learn to notice when anxiety arises and not chase after those anxiety producing stories all the time. So the choice that I'm talking about is where we spend our mental energy. Do we spend it chasing after and developing stories in our mind, or do we learn the techniques that help us sort of gently acknowledge them and come back to the present where we might find that there is some sense of happiness or contentment? Now, I should, again, define these terms before we go too far. The first term that I want to look at is stress. So stress is generally considered to be like a body's reaction to a trigger. If it's a call from an unknown number, or it's your mom saying, we need to talk, there's generally a stress response, but it could be a short-term experience. Whereas anxiety, on the other hand, has sometimes been defined as a, quote, sustained mental health disorder, unquote, which it's more about how it arises from a stressful trigger, but it doesn't fade away. Anxiety has both the cognitive element and the physiological response in that form of stress, which means that we experience anxiety in both the mind and the body. So one way to think about this distinction between stress and anxiety is that stress is a response to a perceived threat. Again, it could be as simple as an unknown number, while anxiety manifests even where there is no clear and present danger. So the call comes and goes, but then we're on our computer quickly Googling all that number and saying, what if it's my ex? And what if they're trying to reach me? What if something horrible has happened to my old cat? Like it's the stories upon stories upon stories that then spin out of that initial response. So stress exists. That is part of what we have to acknowledge. But I'm not going to say like meditation, we wave a wand when we meditate and there's no longer, that issue with your family. There's no longer that year-end deadline. But we do learn through the practice of meditation that we don't have to hold ourselves in the same state of anxiety that we might normally actually engage in. Because anxiety is a little bit like a hidden veil that sort of keeps us cut off from the world around us. Like an actual veil, it obscures our vision. We are unable to see beyond the thing stressing us out today. If a family member who it's sort of become like a thing as they've gotten older. It's like, what is the thing this week? And this week it's like, there's no reason that she will need to use her generator, her backup generator in her home, but it is a thing that is, needs to be repaired, and the part's not coming till Friday. So it's like, that's a good example of, oh, that could be a stressful situation if the power went out. But the amount of mental energy that's going into, well, what if the weather turns later? What if something happens overnight? What if it's all of those what ifs that are sort of keeping locked in anxiety to the extent that you might try and engage this person in a conversation about their holiday shopping, and they can't actually get there because they're very focused on when this part for the generator might come. So that's sort of an example of like how we get obscured with anxiety. But I don't mean to pick my family member, poor thing. The idea here is that there's way too many of us just going around acting from this sort of anxious place instead of connecting to what in the Buddhist tradition we would refer to as our inherent peace. So I always think about this time of year that it's sort of ridiculous that we aren't all having a conversation about these things that are actually causing us stress or anxiety. To actually unveil these things, lift that veil, and actually have more of a conversation about it can be very helpful. Now, how do we lift that veil? We lift that veil of anxiety through meditation. Shamatha is a Sanskrit word, which can be translated as calm abiding or peaceful abiding. You might have heard of it referenced as mindfulness of the breath. That's how we often refer to it in the West. Some of you may have heard me use this particular definition before, but I always think it's worth reiterating that here in the West, when we talk about mindfulness, we often go back to like a Jon Kabat-Zinn definition, which is very useful, where he said it is being present to what is currently occurring without judgment. It's a beautiful definition, actually. It's not just be present, it's being present to what's currently occurring. That's the breath or that sound or whatever it might be, and we're not judging it. Those two last words, without judgment, it's very hard for many of us. And this is why I always say that mindfulness is a way not just to become more present, but it's also a way to become kinder to ourselves. That essentially what we're doing here is we're relaxing into the present moment while reifying positive tendencies that we could let ourselves off the hook. And here's how we do that. I'm going to lead us in some meditation. There's essentially three very, very simple steps to meditation practice, this particular form of mindfulness at least. One, take an upright but relaxed posture. Two, in mindfulness of the breath practice, we connect with the breath. That is the object that we will be present with. And then three, when we get distracted, we invoke those last two words of that definition. We don't engage with it with the sense of judgment, oh, I'm bad at this, oh, I shouldn't have so many thoughts. It's without judgment. It's a sense of kindness, a sense of gentleness to ourselves, that we use the act of meditation as a way to befriend all of who we are. If you met a new friend, maybe at a holiday party, and you started to hang out with them, you wouldn't start judging them from the get-go and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they wear those types of shoes. Those shoes are so ugly, right? We would say, oh, I'm interested in this person. I'm very curious about them. And we would sort of gently get to know them and ask them questions and hang out with them. And the more time we spend with them, the more we're like, oh, this feels like a real friendship. It could be weeks, months, years, but we look over our shoulder and we say, oh my gosh, I love my friend. It all started with that simple act of just spending time together. This is why I think of meditation not just as a way to become present, but as a way to really befriend ourselves. Because what we're doing is we're just spending time with ourselves. We're just hanging out. That's it. And we're not judging ourselves. We're being gentle. We're being inquisitive about our experience. And the more time we do that, the more we get to know ourselves better. And then weeks, months pass, maybe years, and we look over our shoulder and we say, oh, maybe I love myself a little more. One last story, and I promise we'll meditate. I'm reminded of a moment many years ago when we had just founded the network of meditation studios that I co-founded, Mindful. And we were running a special where if someone came and they meditated for 30 days in a row, they would get their next month membership half off. And it was a great incentive. But really, it was us basically saying, like, in order for someone to really get into the habit, they need to make it a habit. It can't be a once a week thing, and they won't see the benefit in the same way. So we really incentivize people to come every day and attend class. And then, a few weeks into this, we started asking, is it anyone's 30-day today? Like the end of their 30-day challenge? And sometimes people would raise their hands. I always admired the teachers. This wasn't me that did this, but another teacher, she asked, oh, great. Like, what will you tell us? I'm tired of talking about the benefits of meditation. You tell us, what did you get out of 30 days of meditation? And this man, very thoughtfully, said, I don't know if I could measure that I am this much more present or this much better a listener, but I do know that this is the first time in my life, in my mid-50s, the first time that I genuinely feel like I love myself. When I heard that, I almost cried because that's so moving. It's like, this is a powerful practice if we exert ourselves in it. So let's do a little bit of practice together. And even when I say that, everyone always adjusts. I always love seeing all the cameras on. Everyone starts wiggling in their seat, myself included. So we'll just plant our feet firmly on the ground, about hips width apart. And if you're on a cushion, you can sit with your legs loosely crossed. Just take a breath here and land in the body, inhabit the body. Feeling down through the sits bones and the feet. And then we lift up very gently through the top of the head, elongating the spine. And from here, we let all the muscles hang from this strong skeletal structure. So we can relax the shoulders, even if you want to roll them up or down and then let them hang loose. We even place the palms down on the thighs, maybe an inch or two away from the kneecaps, just to provide a little bit of balance and support for the back. Relaxing the muscles in the face. We could even tuck the chin in slightly, but relax the jaw. So the lips might slightly part. This relieves some of the tension we hold in the face. Now you can make a conscious decision here. You can either close your eyes for the duration of the sit, letting the lids gently shut, or you could leave the eyes about half open, resting the gaze 3, 4 feet ahead of you on the ground, loose and unfocused manner. When you feel settled in the body, just notice how you are breathing. You've been breathing all along, but just take the time here to recognize the in breath and out breath. There's no need to change the breath or alter it in any way. This is more an act of just relaxing into feeling the breath as it naturally moves through you. Now, we've gone through the first two steps I mentioned. We took this upright and relaxed posture. We connected with the breath, but inevitably, we get distracted. Everyone gets distracted. Meditation is the most normal thing. The mind kicks up some thoughts, and it might be some of those anxiety producing thoughts that we talked about before. Oh, what if this happens tomorrow? What if that happens in this meeting? And what we're going to do is just gently acknowledge the thought, but not chase after it. We're not grasping or holding on to anything here. We just acknowledge the thought, we come back to the breath. So, what we can do is we can very gently and silently in our own mind just say to ourselves, thinking. Oh, you know what? Thinking. Having acknowledged it, we come right on home to the breath. When you're ready, you can begin to move out of the practice by opening your eyes or raising your gaze, bringing some light movement back into the body, whatever feels right to you. So, again, this is a very simple practice. It falls also under the heading of not necessarily easy for many people. It's just a sort of getting used to it process here. Again, I've been leading meditation for 23 years. How old am I? 23 years now. And it's just a continuous thing. It feels like I can't get away with not mentioning that I do CrossFit at this point. It's one of those tropes that I know is like common for people that do CrossFit, but this analogy is actually, I think, helpful. That when I first learned a few years ago, I went to lift a heavy weight off the ground. It's known as a deadlift, and you push down through your feet and you rise up. And after I was done, the person who was training me said, "How did that feel?" And I said, "Deeply uncomfortable." He says, "Well, how many times have you done it before?" I said, "Including the 3 times we just did it?" 3 times. And he goes, "Well, that's why, isn't it?" He was very sweet about it. And that's exactly it. It's like now, years later, I automatically know how to hold my body and it feels very fluid. But it was just the sheer repetition of the thing that made it so. So, same thing with meditation. I realize some people here may have been meditating for years. Some people, this might have been their first meditation session. So, it's just that sheer repetition that each time, for example, we acknowledge a thought and we come back, these days the research actually says we are rewiring the brain. We're creating new neural pathways It's incredible some of the research that we have from University of Wisconsin, MIT, Harvard, elsewhere. All of these studies saying if we meditate just a little bit consistently, even if over a period as short as 8 weeks, we see these changes in the brain that actually, and yeah, they credit to many different things, but people sleep better, people feel kinder to one another, people are more present, they're more focused, they feel like they are, of course, less stressed, all of these things. But I think it also comes back to that idea of like, oh, I'm able to let go of the stressful thought or anxiety producing thought, come back to the present moment. And within that, I realize that there's more room for me, again, to go back to what we talked about initially, to experience happiness. And at this point, people generally are like, but Lodro, you don't understand the pressure from my family, my work, my whatever. And I get that because, again, a couple decades, I've heard it all. Literally everyone thinks that they are carrying a lot on their shoulders. And that's true. Many people are. Many, many of us are. And at the same time, this works for them. I can't tell you the number of times that I've, particularly like this time of year, um, my wife is also a meditation teacher, and people are always like, "Well, what do you do?" And we'll be at a sort of cocktail party or a fundraiser or something, and we always like wait for the other person to explain that we're meditation teachers, because then there's often a conversation, and it's not always, but there's the sense of, "Oh, I tried that once and it didn't work for me." Or I tried that a few times and it didn't work for me. But again, I go back to that thing of the deadlift. If you do it once or 3 times, yeah, it's going to feel deeply uncomfortable. But if we actually get into the rhythm of doing this regularly, really considering a daily habit of it, then it's absolutely life changing. Again, I was referring to the research. That's on the objective side. I can just say subjectively from my many years of doing it. At this point, 35 years of doing it. Yeah, that's right. Um, that the changes are so subtle that we're often the last people to notice. My favorite version of that story is I was teaching a meditation class some years ago, and I was talking about how the changes are subtle. And this guy approached me after, and he said, "You're right." And I actually had this really funny thing happen where I missed my flight back from London the other day. He was flying back to New York City, and I had to call my business partner. I said, "Listen, I'm missing a flight. I can't get back. Let's talk about tomorrow. Let's go over all of the meetings, and some of them were big meetings, and it was a really big deal that he wasn't going to be there. And they sort of figured out how to handle it." And he goes, "Is that it? Is there anything else I'm missing? Any questions?" And his business partner goes, "Yeah, why aren't you freaking out right now?" He goes, "I don't know." And the business partner goes, "Is it because you've been meditating?" He goes, "Oh, maybe it's because I've been meditating." And it's often something like that, where it's so subtle. It's like, "Oh, I'm not freaking out about this stressful work situation." And someone else points out, "Maybe it's because you've been meditating." So this is why I'm a firm advocate. So much of my work really is not just, oh, let me just offer one-off meditation instruction, although I love doing it. I really do. But it is a sense of how can we help people really get into the habit, fall in love with the practice. I don't want to make it seem like it's like a horrible task that you have to, like, teaching a child to brush their teeth or something. Right? But it's not a bad analogy because we all do, have to brush our teeth. It's a good thing for us. It's sort of like that in that sense of like getting into the rhythm, and then we know it's actually a benefit to us. But it's not. It can be a really enjoyable thing when we fall into the rhythm. That's the beauty of it. This is why also I offer these programs at the top of every year, starting in January, of the Buddhist immersion and the mindfulness teacher training, because they're both really good opportunities for people to go quite deep. I've never had someone graduate from these 5-month long programs and say, "Oh, my meditation practice didn't stick." It's something that actually just solidifies it for people for the rest of their life. I mean, that's, say what you will about my teaching or any of the other great teachers who are actually involved or any of the other aspects of the program, but just the fact that everyone who actually like goes through it and engages with the curriculum, that they go away, and it's been 6 years that we've been doing this program, that they all are like, yes, that's the one thing that I actually will never give up is my meditation practice, because they see the benefit at the end. 5 months of meditation will do that. If 8 weeks can change the brain, 5 months, 20 weeks is really significant as a life changer. The Buddhist immersion, since I'm on this topic and I'll be brief, it's my favorite thing to offer, that and the mindfulness teacher training, both, because they go hand in hand. You could do one or both together. The Buddhist immersion, it's every week for 20 weeks, one element of Buddhism. And the reason I love it so much is because it's rare. When I was coming up, you would take a class on something called the Six Paramitas, and then a couple months later, there might be something on the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, and you sort of have to like figure out how all the puzzle pieces click together. Whereas this is systematic. This is okay. We actually, in the first year, we had someone who was into programming, and she said, "I want to actually do like a series of like clicks, where it's like you click on the Four Noble Truths, and then it drops down into the Eightfold Path, and you click on right mindfulness from the Eightfold Path that clicks onto the talk of the four foundations of mindfulness." It's sort of like that. It's like everything the Buddha taught unfolded, sort of accordions out over time, from the earliest teachings all the way to the final work that he offered us. So, for anyone who's interested in the full gamut of Buddhism, this is the program. Again, I find it somewhat rare to have it all in one place, which is why I'm always so excited to offer it. And alongside that, there's sort of a live online meditation like this every Monday morning with myself. My wife leads them once a month. We have guest teachers every month. So there's always a guided meditation for a half hour. We gather as a community to do that. And the community aspect is really important too. Everyone gets, anyone who wants to at least, gets set up with a accountability group that you should check in with each other regularly. And it could be as simple as, hey, did you meditate today? And someone else says, yes, I meditated. And you sort of all, again, hold each other accountable for keeping up with your consistent meditation practice. And there's monthly meetups that are really fun, very like social gatherings. People can work one-on-one with me if that's something that's interested in. And there's also 150 plus guided meditations that are offered to everyone that come in so that you can really find the right practice for you. But we try and guide people more personally than just saying, here's a library, go nuts. But, where can we start and how do we develop over time based on that sort of unfolding of the Buddhist path? And for people who are interested in the mindfulness teacher training, I'm always happy to talk to them one-on-one about that, because I always find these days there's so many different teacher trainings out there. When I started teaching these things maybe a decade ago, there were less options. And some of them, it's like, oh, you memorize some scripts and you can now go teach. It's sort of like they send you a certificate if you download the course. It's like all in one. Whereas this is sort of the antithesis. This is very personal. It's small groups. It's meeting once a month with me. It's real live feedback, testing your voice as a meditation teacher, getting feedback from a small group, getting feedback from me. And it's a really fun program. So anyway, if anyone's interested in that, when I said, oh, I can talk to you one-on-one, is because when people apply, that's the next step. I always want to meet everyone one-on-one and say, oh, is this the right fit? Because there might be some people who are a little bit too new and they might want to just do the Buddhist immersion that year, or they might benefit from a different program that's not my program. It's always good to make sure that's the right thing for everyone. So when people apply, I always meet with them. Anyway, I mentioned all of that in the sense of like, almost like a plea that if you are interested in meditation, that you don't just sort of say, oh, that was a cool one-off, but that you really, if not through me, through other resources, get into a groove with meditation, because that's the way that we actually see the benefit. But all of that being said, you might be saying, but Lodro, I need help now. Those benefits of meditation 5 months in sound great. I need something next week with my family. And this is where I want to talk to you about family karma. So family karma is a term that I coined, although I imagine someone must have used it at some point. It was Ram Dass who actually famously said, if you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your family. And I do love that quote because it's sort of apropos to what we experience this time of year. When I talk about karma is a very advanced Buddhist topic and one that is absolutely covered in the Buddhist immersion, so I'll be very brief here. It's essentially looking at the cause and effect that continues to reify and reify and reify so that it becomes strongly ingrained habitual ways of considering ourselves, considering our loved ones, considering the world around us. And these ideas propel us then to do the same sort of thing over and over again. So it's this sort of, I always think of it like a small ship with a sail that it just, the winds of karma come and push us along. And if we don't know how to actually combat them, then we just sort of get whipped up and go with it. So this is where meditation, again, can be very helpful, that we cut through our particular patterns because we know how to actually adapt and meet karma where it is. In sort of long-term Buddhist logic, says that we've been playing out the same sort of patterns of passion, aggression, ignorance with various versions of our families for lifetimes. But you don't have to believe in multiple lifetimes to know that if you're complaining like a teenager to your dad, it's because you used to complain like a teenager to your dad, right? There's something that's like deeply ingrained with the patterns with our family. You know, the default settings for how we relate to each other, who holds what role, how we express love, all of these things are sort of wired to some extent through constant daily interactions that have been going on for in many of our cases for decades. So there are specific dynamics between parents and children, between siblings, between cousins, all of it. And some of it is great. Some of it helps us. You know, that really lovely connection with our cousin, and every year we see them and it feels uplifting to us. We should cultivate more of that. And when we walk away, we might be inspired to do that. But some of it does not. And some of it we might say, oh, I need to cut it out. My wife is fond of saying that our family is so good at pushing our buttons because they're the ones who installed them there in the first place. Right? They know. They know exactly what they are. So if we're not careful, we will continue to reify the patterns and dynamics that exist, not even intentionally. It's almost out of sheer laziness. Because most families carry a this has worked for us thus far, no one's killed each other mindset. And we don't really want to then budge from business as usual. It's like good enough is good enough. The Tibetan Buddhist teacher Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, when asked about the very complex notion of karma, he said, everything is predetermined until now. And I love that everything is predetermined. Yeah, you're going to go home and your family member is going to say that thing they say every year, and they're going to push that button. And then what happens now? In this moment, do we continue to spiral into the same habitual pattern? Or do we have the wherewithal, the mental capacity to say, wait, I don't need to do that. I don't need to keep reifying this. I could change the flow of business as usual. Everything is predetermined until now. Now, in this moment, we can make different choices than what we have done in the past. I think that's the beauty and sort of the liberatory facet of karma, that it's not all predetermined. It's predetermined until this moment. Things have led, sort of spiral into this. And now here we are, and we say, well, what do I want to do with all of that? Is this serving me? Is this not? If it's not serving me, can I show up differently? Could I embody mindfulness by deeply listening to this person? By becoming gently inquisitive about their lived experience? Could I aim to hold space for them to talk about what's ultimately on their mind without offering advice or judgment? Could I, if I'm stuck, could I just say, hey, let's go somewhere new. Let's try something different. Let's go eat a new food. Let's go for a walk together. Anything that you've never done before. Just to sort of shake things up. Many, many years ago, decade ago, gosh, time flies, yeah. I was on a vacation with some friends, and there was this woman that my friend was dating and then ultimately ended up marrying. And people were generally pretty hard on her. She was a particular person and she had particular preferences and didn't always make things easy for everyone. And the reason I think of it is because I literally said, okay, I tried a lot of the things that I normally think of in my mental, tool bag for the sort of way that we relate to this person. And I said, let's just go for a walk on the beach together. We took an hour-long walk, And that was the opportunity that we were shifted out of that group dynamic. We were just open, we were present. I got to know her in a much more thoughtful way, and we were actually really had a lot of compassion for each other and what we had been through in our lives. And we came back, and I still think of this person so incredibly fondly, specifically because I said, oh, what if we just did something new, right? What if we completely changed the dynamic here? So this is all a long-winded way to say that everything is predetermined until now means that we can always shift our dynamics if we sort of have the ability to catch ourselves and say, wait, what if I did something completely new? When we do that, what we're saying is, I want to see this person not as the ideas and the stories that I tell myself about them, but I want to actually engage with them from the perspective of who they are underneath that. And from a Buddhist point of view, what we're saying is who they are underneath, same thing with us, is they're basically good. They are basically kind. They are basically wise. So we're seeing them for their innate wakefulness, their kindness, their strength and wisdom, as opposed to boxing them in with ideas about what they should be doing for work or how they should be acting in this group or whatever. So the more we connect with their basic goodness, the more abundant we both feel. So I realize I've been talking and guiding us in meditation for 45 minutes now. I should wrap up, but I do want to mention sort of 3 on the spot techniques that can sort of help us as we go deeper with our meditation practice, as we learn the tools to cut through sort of the habitual karma that we might find ourselves in this holiday season with family, or maybe for you it's with work. But I think it's all still very relevant, particularly how it combats some of the anxiety or anxiety producing thoughts that we might have. So, 3 tools. One, and I always love this one. When we notice that we are spiraling a little bit, we ask ourselves the question, is this helpful? Another version of this is this useful? Both are wonderful. It basically, if I'm thinking about something for the first time, of, oh, I've got to get to this appointment tomorrow, and I guess I should take this road, and I should probably allow this amount of time. First time is helpful. The 50th time I'm plotting my route and what I need to do to get out the door and what I'm going to wear, after that point, when I ask myself the question, is this helpful or is this useful? The answer is going to come back, no. So that's sort of a wonderful way to sort of catch ourselves again, to sort of cut through the habitual dynamic and say, wait, maybe I can do something different. When that no comes back to me, I go, oh, right, I can let this go and I can come back to the present moment. The second on the spot technique, what can I enjoy right now? When we're able to get out of our head and relax into the present moment, we may glimpse just a simple form of contentment. When I asked earlier at the very top of our time together, would you rather be happy or would you rather be anxious? And you all said happy. This is what I'm talking about, is coming into the present moment and saying, okay, there's a lot going on, but what can I enjoy right now? Just asking ourselves that question. It's nice and warm in this room. It's relatively quiet in my home, right? It can be you in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor. It could be you standing there about to go into a meeting. But what can I enjoy right now? Oh, there's kids playing nearby. Oh, there's the company of my loved one. Oh, there are friends around who care about me. Just simple things might arise naturally when we ask that question. What can I enjoy right now? And 3, what am I grateful for today? I am a big advocate for gratitude meditation in general, but specifically, I do this every morning. This is part of my morning routine that I wake up, and then before I roll out of bed or pick up the phone or anything, I ask myself, what am I grateful for today? And because I've been doing this for a number of years every single day, it's not surprising that a lot of the same things tend to come up. But it is a really wonderful question to ask fresh every morning, because what we do when we do that is we're sort of preempting that thing that many of us wake up with, which is, oh my God, what am I behind on? What do I need to accomplish right away? Oh my gosh, are there emails that people are expecting? It's first off, before I go there, what am I grateful for? And not what I think I should feel grateful for, but what I actually do. So those are the three. Is this helpful / is this useful? What can I enjoy right now? And asking ourselves, what am I grateful for today? So when we combine sort of the consistency of the meditation practice, the um, awareness that arises in response, that we can begin to cut through some of the habitual dynamics and the family karma that's no longer serving us. And then on the spot to cut through some of the anxiety producing thoughts, we find that we can actually live a happier and more relaxed life. And it's a little bit of like a bar graph, where it's like we start maybe with um, like, oh, I'm living like 90% of my life pretty stressed out and anxious, and 10% of my life pretty present. But the more we practice, again, the more we become familiar with the practice, the more we learn to befriend ourselves, it gets, oh, it's 80/20. And it continues on. And again, the changes are so subtle, we don't always notice the benefits of the meditation. But then all of a sudden we come up and we're like, oh, I'm spending more of my mental energy, more of my time actually relaxing into the present moment, experiencing the sense of contentment or happiness, and less held by anxiety. When we do, we begin to appreciate the details of our life. We begin to really enjoy the contentment found in this very moment. So I wanted to actually allow a little bit more time than what we have for questions, but this is a good moment for us to dive in. We still have 10 minutes here. So if you have questions, you could either turn on your microphone or you can type them into the chat. And if you type them into the chat and you prefer to remain anonymous, because this will be sent out to the other people who signed up for this program, just maybe write anonymous there so that I won't say your name. Yeah,
Question, if I may. So, I mean, I've been practicing mindfulness and, I'm a practicing Buddhist for quite a few years now. Last year, my mother passed away, and my dad's not really taking it very well. Well, understandably, he's not taking it very well. So I've approached it from one aspect, and he's approached it from a different side. So it's almost like he's become the child and I've become the adult. Um, it's difficult to know how to comfort him and kind of explain. And the way I've approached it through mindfulness, through being present, when he doesn't believe or understand the same kind of perspectives. So I just wondered how you would how you deal with having a relationship with someone who's very close to you, who doesn't kind of follow the same path with being mindful and Buddhism and that kind of thing. I'm not sure if that's a question for this kind of class, but it was just something that came to mind.
It's a great question, really. Yeah, thank you for asking it, Jonathan. So the I want to start by just saying I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your mother. I myself lost my father some years ago, and I know how difficult that can be. And also, as you mentioned, just how that upsets that really cuts through the family karma dynamics, right? It just uproots everything. And everyone started saying, okay, so what's the new rules? How does this now work? And it's horrible and devastating and heartbreaking. And at the same time, there can be more room perhaps to start to suss out conversations that we may not have previously been able to have. So it'll be very curious to hear how things develop with you over time with this, but I am very sorry for your loss. I'm reminded of a wonderful book. Yeah, Only Don't Know, which is a collection of letters sent to and then responded by this Korean Zen master Sung Son. So back in, I want to say, late 60s, early 70s, people would either handwrite or type on a typewriter letters, mail them, and then they had the smarts and wonderful wherewithal to keep his responses that he would send back. So it's fun in that perspective. It feels of a moment, to be sure. And one person asked a very similar question in terms of their family and saying, like, I've sort of dove into this thing and I want to be, you didn't say this exactly, but I want to be a good Buddhist and I want to be of support and I want to also, like, have these sorts of conversations with them. And Sung San, in his genius, said, don't tell them that you're a Buddhist, show them that you're a Buddhist. And I'm doing a poor job already paraphrasing it, so I'll just go further with that. It's the notion that a lot of times we say, oh, I've got to sort of say the right thing. I've got to sort of communicate, well, here's the benefit of mindfulness, and here's how, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you're going to feel better, or you're going to work with the situation better, or whatever. And what he was saying is, if you really embody mindfulness, if you really embody a sense of awake, then someone will pick up on that and they will benefit from that no matter what, which I love. It's we often in the West, we want to do the right thing. We want to say the right thing because we're so action oriented. And here it's about being, which is, so subtle again, that often people are like, okay, but fine, but tell me what to do. It's like, no, don't do. Just show up. Just show up for that person, embodying mindfulness. Be, as you said, the work that you're doing to be as present as possible with him, I'm sure is actually really, really helpful. Even if it's not remarked upon, or even if it's not obvious to you, I'm sure it's having a really beautiful benefit on the dynamic. I'm very confident in that from what little I know. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question here from Helen. Oh, and I'm seeing a comment that's just directed to me saying, this is wonderful. Thanks so much. It's really my pleasure. I really do enjoy spending time with everyone. So Helen's saying, I have a meditation question. When I get relaxed, my breath becomes shallow and harder to track. So I start controlling it a little, breathing deeper than I normally would. But the guidance is not to change your breathing. I hate to ask the dreaded question, am I doing it right? But great question. Similar to what we were talking about before, like here in the West, we really want to do something, we don't want to be with something. It's similar with the breath. We sometimes, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case with you, but sometimes people will overthink the breath. Oh, is it too shallow? Is it too deep? Should it be through my nose, not through my mouth? All of these are very good questions, but it's actually like the mind is trying to come up with something to do. It's trying to like do something in the meditation, when in fact the act is not thinking about the breath, but being with the breath. So feeling the breath, relaxing with the breath. These are good words for it. So one thing that might even be helpful, and we can all just do this as sort of a closing experiment, is you take whatever version of your good meditation posture you want, and just bring your full attention to your left knee. Bring your attention to your left knee. Bring your full attention to your right elbow. Bring your attention to the top of your head. Now bring your attention to your breath. Okay. So whatever you experienced in that moment, that's what we're talking about, right? We just drop in. Sometimes when we zigzag like that, it's like whatever we find, we're like, right, that's me being with the breath. I'm not overthinking the breath, or I'm not trying to control the breath, as you said, or any of it. It's just being with it. Okay, friends. I think this is a good time for us to conclude, but I wanted to just express my genuine appreciation for you all making it. As I said at the very top of our time together, it's just you could be doing anything this time of year, and for you to be here and working with me in capacity of meditation and learning more about these things is so inspiring to me. So thank you. Okay, have a wonderful evening, everyone.